There's no question that plenty of the companies I have been exposed to in my 18 years of coaching have this notion of like their values are on the walls but not in the halls, right? So they sort of have these great mission statements, they talk about how they care about their employees, but they don't really do that. There is no question that plenty of leaders say one thing and then do something else.
We have the pleasure of welcoming Alisa Cohn today to our interview series. I'm Sumita Mariam from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Alisa Cohn is the CEO of Alisa Cohn and Associates Inc. She was named #1 startup coach in the world at the Thinkers 50 Marshall Goldsmith Leading Coaches Awards in London. She was also named as one of the top 30 global gurus for startups. She has been featured on BBC, Bloomberg, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and other regional publications. Her specialities include the executive presence, power, influence, and charisma, corporate politics, strategic decision-making, developing a strong personal brand, and building social capital. We are extremely happy and honored to have someone of her stature on our interview series today. Welcome, Alisa. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here, and congratulations on all your accomplishments. You guys have really built a lovely organization.
Thank you so much, and it's absolutely our pleasure to have you. So, moving on to the interview, Alisa, can we start by, can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far? What brought you to Alisa Cohn and Associates?
Well, I had been, I was a CPA and a strategy consultant, and I was the CFO of a startup and the head of strategy of another startup. So all of that made me realize 2 things. One is that I really wanted to make a difference, and it was really important for me to make a difference very substantially, and also that I had a lot to say about the world of business. I have an MBA and I have a CPA, and so I'm sort of trained in business, but I have a psychological orientation. And I realized that I really cared about what made people tick in service of the greater good or in service of the company. So through all that, I found coaching and started my own company.
That's nice. It's wonderful that you had that realization of, I need to make a difference. Yeah. And, coming to your specialities, can you tell us a little bit about your work as a startup coach? What are the main things that you help new entrepreneurs with?
Right. So entrepreneurs who are first of all, they start with like an idea, and they have to become somebody who's focused on building a product or a service into someone who's building a business. So that requires a lot of skills, the ability to galvanize a team, the ability to pull in resources that they need to, obviously raise money. Most importantly, it requires them to understand what the situation is, how they need to adapt their skills very rapidly, and then lead in a different way. So a lot of startups I work with are high growth. So if the company is growing at high growth, how are you as a leader adapting yourself in a high growth way and also quite rapidly? And that's a lot of the challenges that startup leaders I deal with face. And it's both new entrepreneurs and then also successful entrepreneurs who've done it once or twice before, but they realize that they could use some help doing it differently this time around.
Oh, that's wonderful. And also, how would you go about coaching new leaders? I mean, what would be the qualities that you want the new leaders to have in them? And what would you focus on improving first?
Well, I mean, if you think about startup leaders and startup founders, there's a lot to be said for grit and persistence. And there's a lot that has been said about grit and persistence and resilience. And the founders that I have dealt with have had many near-death experiences on the way to success. It's the ability to sort of be able to adapt and, take difficulties in stride and overcome them. That's one thing. And the second thing is to be able to do that learning and that fast learning that you need to. So the way I help founders work is really, I do the 360 feedback for them, which means helps them get a sense from people all around them how they are showing up. And I help them think about where are they going, and how are they going to get there in terms of their ability to put different behaviors together and grow new behaviors to become better leaders. So one example of that is communication style. Mm-hmm. When you're a founder and you're working with 8 people or 10 people or 20 people, your communication style can be pretty casual. You're working one-on-one with folks. It's easy to bring the whole team together. That's very different from when you're a founder of a company that now you're the CEO and founder of a company that's like 100 people or 500 people. You need to have a different way of thinking about who you're including in decision making, how you're communicating to the team, how you're thinking about carving out an executive team to help you be a steward of the business. It's a different way of thinking for a lot of founders and CEOs, and I help them think about that and then execute on that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's quite interesting. So let me ask you this question. So now with this current scenario of the pandemic, we have a lot of remotely working teams, like the members of the same team are working from different cities, sitting in their own houses. So how would you advise a leader of today to manage a remotely working team?
Yes, it is it's a challenge right now. I've actually written a number of articles on this for Forbes and for Inc. The first thing, you think about the crisis, there are different stages of the crisis. And the first part of the crisis was just to get your arms around where is the company, how are people feeling? Things happened very quickly. So my recommendation at that point was to quickly have regular all hands meetings, to quickly pull your executive team together, to make sure you're having one-on-ones with people remotely by video to check in and see how people are doing. Next, and now in this stage, it's very important to really figure out what are your clear, specific goals? And how are you making sure that you're very, very clear with the whole company about the most important strategic mandates, your objectives and goals and what you're driving for, and to make sure that all your executives and all your leaders help their people understand their part in that goal. When you can't see everybody, you can't have that informal, organic, sort of communication. Everyone needs to be much more clear about how they're sort of feeding into the goal, what their deliverables are, and who they are working together with. So focusing on that and that kind of clarity is very important for a remote environment.
So the leaders have to make sure that their team members know what they're supposed to do and the results that are expected of them. Yeah,
definitely. In a much more clear way. And then also about who can make what decisions. Again, sometimes these things are kind of organically decided in the workplace. You can check in with people. It's very easy. Now people are spread out. By the way, they're on video and they're remote, but they're also now in different time zones. Possibly they've gone different places. So making sure that you have communication systems that don't rely on that organic communication, so they know what decisions they can make, who they need to check with, that helps things run much more smoothly.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. And do you have an ideal workplace culture in your mind? If there's something like that, what would that be?
Oh, that's interesting. I think that workplace culture is, if you think about it with startups, it is very dependent on the nature and makeup of the founder. And I think that workplace cultures have to also adapt to the needs of the environment. So for example, if you're in financial services and you're a fintech startup, integrity and compliance and also process is actually super important in that kind of environment. That's very different from, let's say, a community-based or social media startup where you really want to think about fun and joy and delight. Yes, integrity is important there too, but it's a different need in terms of the mechanics and specifications of what you're trying to get done. So I do think that the ideal culture does come from the makeup of the team and kind of what they're trying to do, what the company's trying to do, and the founder. And the last thing I would say about that is, the quirks and special sauce of the employees help build a vibrant and resilient and sustaining culture. And I think it's important to think about culture in terms of who you're bringing together.
Yeah.
It's a long answer, but I'm not sure there is an ideal, but there's probably an ideal for you.
Thank you so much. So, do you think, the people we pick and the leaders play a very important role in, maintaining the culture that we've established in an organization?
Yes, I think it's very important. I think that a founder, first of all, wants to think. Actually, I have these two. I work with this one company, and there's two co-founders,
Mhm.
and the co-founders who didn't even launch a product for 4 years and didn't really even build a team for 2 years, spent a lot of that time in the beginning thinking about what is our ideal workplace, who are the people we want to have around, what kinds of values are really important to us. If we're going to build a company from scratch, and by the way, we are building a company from scratch,
Yeah.
how do we want to organize it so it's a reflection of our deepest values? And they spent a lot of time thinking about that. And part of what they came up with is people first. And so they brought on people who are bought into people first. And even as they've been navigating through this crisis, they've been demonstrating what people first looks like in a whole bunch of different arenas. So just one example of the way I think it's essential for founders to think in advance what kind of culture they want to build and work towards building it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, how do you think, building an employer brand for that matter, how important is that? How do you think it's going to, accelerate the growth of a startup or, bring more profits in?
Well, I think, it's so interesting. Now is a time we're really focused on people and people's health and well-being. We see the importance of culture and of engagement and of people and talent in the workplace. I think um, having a strong employer brand is essential if you want to attract the right people to it. And also if you want people to work together, right? And to sort of promulgate that people first, or that sort of specific employer brand. Um, I think that's really important. And I guess I would just add that the more you can have a strong brand with your people, that translates almost by definition to customers. I think that customers can tell how the people feel about working within that company. And so that helps them either want to be engaged or unfortunately not want to be engaged. So I think it's important.
Yeah. So that's an interesting answer. But I would also like to ask you, we hear a lot of people talking about, employee centricity and business centricity. It is employee centricity now, and all of that. But there is a side of it where, there is another part where people speak about, employee centricity is a myth. And there are not a lot of organizations that actually apply what they're preaching. So what is your opinion on that?
There's no question that plenty of the companies I have been exposed to in my 18 years of coaching have this notion of like their values are on the walls but not in the halls, right? So they sort of have these great mission statements, they talk about how they care about their employees, but they don't really do that. There is no question that plenty of leaders say one thing and then do something else. We see that all the time. We certainly see that in our countries. So I think that most employees, though, can tell if, ultimately over time, if their company really means it in terms of being employee centric, and if their leader means it in terms of being employee centric, and ultimately that congruence is what helps people win. I think a great example of that right now is Microsoft. And I think that Microsoft is doing a great job of showcasing the importance to them of their values in terms of being green, in terms of focusing on employees' health and well-being, and also in terms of innovation. And I think we've seen the rise now of Microsoft in light of being sort of serving those underlying kind of core values.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. And
Mm-hmm.
also, Alisa, just to kind of wrap up the interview, if you
Yeah.
have any important, sound bites that you would like to leave our audience.
Oh, how interesting. Well, I would say this one soundbite I would have, not just for startups, for every single person, is that the more, so I think we're living right now in an age of, anxiety and uncertainty. And I would encourage everybody to see this time as an interesting puzzle, an interesting set of constraints. And what can you do in light of these constraints that is going to bring out your own personal best? And what can you personally do right now that's going to make this very strange time in our lives ultimately like a treasured memory? And as much as you can, think about really living in this time as a moment in time where you started something wonderful, or that was it was a genesis of something wonderful, or that you were able to complete something or build relationships in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do before. I encourage everyone to make use of that time.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And Alisa, it was a pleasure talking to you. I really, really appreciate your time and, sharing your views with us. It has been a totally enriching learning experience for me personally. And if it is for me, surely for our audience too. So, let's keep in touch and have a healthy and safe time ahead of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.